Advancing into the year of 2017, Universal Orlando Resort would host its 27th premier Halloween event, Halloween Horror Nights, in Universal Studios, Florida. This year's event would bring all new terror to experience as more horror intellectual properties and original concepts will come to chilling reality. Your soul has been requested for this year's Halloween Horror Nights because this is the Festival of the Deadliest. This is SP History. In developing the 27th Halloween Horror Nights, Universal Creative would forego creating an original theme for the entire event and return to letting horror intellectual properties be the prominent tool for marketing. Universal would begin teasing the event in early June of 2017, touting "All Our Times Will Come Soon," then ultimately revealing the main tagline, "Your Soul is Requested," proving new horror to come at this year's Halloween Horror Nights. But like previously mentioned, the event would gather a new batch of popular horror IPs to be featured in the Haunted House lineup. For instance, Universal would again team up with television network FX to create a second house based off the popular horror series American Horror Story, continuing off the success of the previous iteration. Other properties to be featured would be of popular films like The Shining and Saw. With that all said, Halloween Horror Nights 27 would run for 34 nights between September to November, 3 more nights than previous, featuring 9 haunted houses, 5 scare zones, and 2 shows, as guests would enter the Festival of the Deadliest and experience the best nightmares that never end. Beginning to discuss the 9 haunted houses at Halloween Horror Nights 27, it would once again be compiled of IP-based houses and terrifying original concepts. The first house would be located inside Soundstage 21 and be the second iteration of a house based off the popular horror anthology series American Horror Story, as this one would be called American Horror Story Volume 2. Within, guests would get to experience 3 more seasons of the show: Asylum, Coven, and Roanoke, as the cast of characters come to life and unleash all their terror. The next house would be placed within Soundstage 22 and be based off the 1980 Stanley Kubrick horror classic The Shining, as it shared the same title. Inside here, guests would step right into the events of the film as they entered the haunted Overlook Hotel and witnessed the horror that exists within. Similar to last year's The Exorcist, Creative found it challenging recreating sets from the film as they wanted to make it feel expanded, as if guests were really inside the Overlook. The third house of the event would be held in Soundstage 24 and be an original concept featuring angels and demons, as it would be called The Fallen. Within here, guests are caught in the crossfire between light and dark, as sinister demons seek to rain chaos upon Earth. Reportedly, the house would feature more demons than angels, as due to public protests, Creative established less heavenly connections. The following house would also be inside Soundstage 24 and be a sequel to the 2014 scare zone Bayou of Blood, as the house would be officially called Dead Waters. Here, guests return to the demented Bayou as the Voodoo Queen rules over this hellish realm and releases all her devilish ghouls to gather new sacrifices. The fifth house would be placed inside the MIB tent and feature the most terrifying films from Blumhouse Productions, as it would be called The Horrors of Blumhouse. Within, guests would get to relive 3 of Blumhouse's most popular franchises: Sinister, The Purge, and insidious, as all the demented monsters and maniacs return in one single house. In original plans of the house, the Ouija film franchise would be featured within, but due to copyright disputes, it would be replaced with The Purge. The sixth house of the event would be located within Sprung Tent 2 and be an original house featuring deadly vampires, as it would be called Hive. Here, guests enter the house on 19 Hemingway Lane, where a nest of bloodthirsty vampires call home and guests must venture through in one piece. Apparently, in early development for this house location, it would instead have been an IP house based off the popular horror film franchise The Conjuring, but due to legal complications, it would be scrapped and Hive would take its place. The next house would be placed in Sprung Tent 1 and be another original concept set in a giant dust storm, as it would be called Scarecrow the Reaping. Inside, guests entered an abandoned farm that is infested with living scarecrows and other creatures who are out for vengeance and will reap any soul for their newest harvest. Scarecrow the Reaping would win House of the Year for 2017. The eighth house would be located inside the Parade Warehouse building and be the return of the Evil Dead franchise to Halloween Horror Nights, as it would be called Ash vs. Evil Dead. Being based off the Starz TV series with the same title, guests get to experience scenes from the first 2 seasons of the show, as they witness Ash Williams take on malicious deadites with a signature chainsaw. The final house of the event would be placed within the Shrek Theater and be the second house to be based off the horror thriller franchise Saw, as this iteration would be called Saw: The Games of Jigsaw. Being very similar to its 2009 version, guests would get to step right into the films and witness Jigsaw's many sinister traps as he delivers his own version of poetic justice. As the 2009 house featured the first 5 films at the time, this one would include all 8 films inside, as at least one trap from each was featured within. This would complete the entire house lineup at this year's Halloween Horror Nights, including more excellent IP house adaptations and new original realms of terror. With the 5 scare zones created for this year's event, it would be similar to the house lineup as it featured IP-based areas and new original domains of evil. The first zone would be located in Plaza of the Stars in Production Central and be filled with this year's most terrifying beings, as it would be called Altars of Horror. Here, guests stepped into the Nexus of Evil, where many of the characters from this year's IP houses have found their way out to the streets and seek their newest victims. The next scare zone would be placed in the New York area of the park and be the second zone to be based off the Universal horror thriller franchise The Purge, as it shared the same name. Within, the annual Purge has returned to the streets of New York, and all the crazed purgers are roaming around and out for blood. The third zone would be held in the San Francisco area and be infested by alien life forms, as it would be called Invasion. Here, guests are brought back to the year of 1955, where a UFO has crashed into the San Francisco wharf, and now alien beings are walking about, looking to experiment on all who pass. The fourth zone would be located in the Central Park area and be based off the 2007 horror cult film Trick or Treat, as it shared the same title. Within, guests are surrounded by the many sinister characters from the film, as they will prey on whoever defies the Halloween spirits. This zone would prove very popular with guests, which would lead to the film's return in a near future event. The fifth and final scare zone of the event would be placed in the Hollywood area and be the ultimate party of mayhem, as it would be called Festival of the Deadliest. Here, the dead have risen, and they invite guests to their grandest celebration as they look to capture their souls. The zone would feature a new Horror Nights original character, Own, who is the secret icon for the event, as he is the leader of the Festival of the Deadliest and speaks in the opening ceremonies for the event. Just like the past few events, there would be some unofficial zones around the park, and this year would only have one located in the Springfield area and be labeled as Clown Saws. Here, the Chainsaw Drill Team have returned, now as demented killer clowns carrying their deadliest weapon, terrorizing all. Moving on to the entertainment offerings for this year, it would see the return of two popular shows. The first show will be held near Mel's Drive-In and be the return of the energizing dance troupe Academy of Villains, as this year's offering would be called Academy of Villains Afterlife. The show would once again feature the dance group, now as creepy mimes, as they put on an exhilarating performance featuring pop culture's most popular music. Though the offering was called Afterlife, the group never performed the actual version of the show, as due to stage damages caused by Hurricane Irma that year, as instead, they performed what's referred as the Irma Show, as alterations had to be made to the stage the show took place on. The second and final show offering would be held in its usual location, the Fear Factor Live Stage, and be the finale of the longest running Horror Nights offering, Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. In their final showing, it would be the Wild Stallions Farewell Tour, as they look to celebrate 26 years of excellence, but the Grim Reaper has crashed the celebration, looking to bring Bill and Ted to hell as they failed to show anything redeeming of pop culture for the entire run, and the duo must convince him otherwise by bringing a cast of characters and celebrities of 2017 to create the most excellent final performance. Characters to be featured in the final show would be the cast of 2017's Power Rangers, Sean Spicer, Moana, and returning characters from previous years. At the beginning of the event, the show had a slightly different plotline involving the Grim Reaper. However, due to the tragic events that occurred on October 1st, 2017 in Las Vegas, Nevada, the show would be updated to be more appropriate to those affected. This would complete all the offerings at the 27th Halloween Horror Nights event, continuing to create excellent street atmosphere and engaging entertainment. In its entirety, Halloween Horror Nights 27 was once again an excellent addition to the collection of events held, continuing to grow the list of superb IP adaptations and improving the quality of sets within each aspect. But as the Festival of the Deadliest would conclude, Halloween Horror Nights would fade into the shadows for another year, preparing for its eventual return as true fear would emerge.